The afternoon of December 6, 1941, there was a woman by the name of Dorothy Edgars. She was a new hire, a translator, and she wanted to stay late and practice her translating. So she grabbed a bunch of messages out of the to-be-read file. Those were the ones that said Pearl Harbor. We didn't care about those. And she started translating them. And as she did, they were asking, how are the carriers aligned? Do they import? How are the battleships aligned? Are the barrage balloons? Are there submarine nets? She started putting together a picture. They're not going somewhere else. They're coming here. She took all the information she had up to her watch captain. He will remain unnamed. We looked at what she did and said, well, you didn't cross this T and dot that I. We'll do it Monday. Have a nice week. December 7th, 1941. Operation Z, the WWII, the largest carrier attack force in the history of the world. 6 frontline aircraft carriers, the Akagi, the Kaga, the Hiryu, the Shoryu, the Shokaku, and the Zuikaku. 420 combat aircraft, 23 support ships. They came in secrecy, and by the end of the morning of December 7th, we didn't have a Pacific fleet. 8 battleships were either sunk or on the bottom. Many of our ships were destroyed, but the Japanese didn't do 2 things. They did not bomb our bunker oil supplies, nor the dry docks, and were able to raise some of the ships, get them fixed, and get them into the fight. That was December 7th. In April of 1942, Jimmy Doolittle, flying B-25s off the carrier Hornet, attacked mainland Japan. They did virtually no damage, but the morale of our country soared. We'd finally done something. That was in April. In May, we fought the Battle of the Coral Sea. The Japanese were in the Pacific, coming down to a place on the southeast corner of New Guinea called Port Moresby. That was about 300 plus miles north of Darwin, Australia. As a precursor to an invasion of Australia. Just to put it in perspective, the first few years of World War II, Darwin was bombed 64 times. We met them with our fleet. At the end of that battle, we had lost the carrier Lexington, we lost some smaller ships and a fleet oiler. The Japanese, they turned their amphibious invasion force around. They lost a light carrier and some smaller ships. But more importantly, there were 2 frontline aircraft carriers there. The Shokaku and the Zuikaku. Shokaku had serious bomb damage. The Zuikaku had a depleted air wing. Both of those carriers went back to Okinawa for repairs and did not show up at the next battle, the Battle of Midway. Now remember I said that we'd broken the Imperial Code, and the guys in Pearl Harbor said they're going to attack some place called, code name AF. Powers to be said, Johnson Island, we know it. And Admiral Nimitz said he didn't think so. He thought they were going to attack Midway. So he had this fellow send a message via submarine cable, that's a cable on the bottom of the ocean, out to Midway, and he said, I want you to send a message in the clear, not coded, that says our desalination plant is broken and we're not sure when it'll be repaired. With that, 2 days later, the invasion force, the AF invasion force, got a message from Tokyo, bring extra water. With that, we knew exactly where they would come. As a matter of fact, we knew the order, complete order of battle, the schedule, everything. We had 3 aircraft carriers, the Hornet, the Yorktown, and the Enterprise. We put them off to the east of Midway Island. Here's Midway, and off to the west comes what's left of the WWII. We were severely outmanned. Now, the fellows on Midway Island started the attack, and they were decimated by the Japanese arrows. Also, torpedo bombers came off the carriers. Of the 41 torpedo bombers sent after the Japanese fleet, 4 returned. During those initial battles, not one hit, not one torpedo struck a Japanese ship. Finally, we thought we had found the convoy. However, the Japanese had turned out of the way, and we'd lost them. a submarine called the Nautilus. And that Nautilus saw the Japanese fleet and closed in for torpedo attacks. When they did, the destroyer Asahi saw them and they started a 2-hour duel. At the end of that 2 hours, the Japanese ship said, you know, the submarine's no longer a threat, my guys are gone, and they went off at flank speed to catch up with the rest of their fleet. Now, a destroyer at flank speed, when you look at it from the air, the wake looks like this big arrow. Well, here comes Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey with 2 squadrons of SVD Dauntless dive bombers. Haven't found the Japanese fleet. They'd already turned. They were getting low on fuel. And he was getting ready to turn around. And he made a fateful decision. He said to himself, we're going to go 5 more minutes. If I don't see anything, we're going back to the fleet. During that 5 minutes, he saw the Arashi in its wake and said, that boy's going somewhere. I'm going to follow him. And he did. In short order, he saw dots on the horizon. Then he saw the ships, the Japanese fleet. They rolled in on 2 carriers, the Akagi and the Kaga. 35 minutes later, aircraft from the Yorktown found the Shoryu and rolled in on that. In minutes, those 3 aircraft carriers were smoking hulks. Later in the day, the Hiryu, which had not been found, did a counterattack, found the Yorktown, bombed it. We actually lost it the next day due to a torpedo attack. Same day, we launched more aircraft off the Enterprise. They found the Hiryu and bombed it, and it sunk the next day. Think about it for a minute. Only 6 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, 4 of the Japanese irreplaceable frontline aircraft carriers were on the bottom. It was such a disaster for the Japanese that they kept it secret from both the military and the civilian population until after the war. If any wounded came back, they made it, classified them as secret patients, made them well and get them back out to the fight. So they couldn't tell what happened. That was the Battle of Midway. In August of 1942, the Marines had their first large-scale amphibious landing on Guadalcanal. That lasted from August 1942 to February 1943. At the end of that, we'd lost about 1,000 Marines, 550 GIs. But we'd also established a very important airfield, Henderson Airfield. Japanese, they lost 25,000 killed and 13,000 were evacuated as non-combat effective. At the beginning of the war, Admiral Yamamoto, Japanese, said, Japan cannot win a war of attrition against America. We have to get them to surrender within 6 to 8 months. The war of attrition had just begun. That was in 1943. Now let's move forward quickly. 1944. In this time, whenever one of our pilots got good at what they were doing in combat, we brought them back here to train our new naval aviators. So when they got out to the fight, they had a pretty good idea of what they were doing. The Japanese, they kept their #1 pilots on the front line all the time, and we killed them. The battle was called the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June of 1944. At the end of that battle, we met the Japanese with 11 carriers versus their 9. At the end of the battle, they were down to 7 carriers, and we had shot down 429 Japanese aircraft at the loss of only 29. Most of those 29 were coming in for night landings. It heralded the end of Japanese naval air power in World War II. One more battle, the Battle of Okinawa. The Battle of Okinawa, possibly the bloodiest battle of all of World War II. It started on 1 April 1945 and ended up less than 3 months later, 21 June 1945. At that point, we had thousands of ships. From horizon to horizon, all you could see were ships. When the battle was over, we had lost almost 800 aircraft, sustained 62,000 casualties, of which 12,500 were killed. At sea, we lost 368 ships, either sunk or damaged. 5,000 sailors were killed, another 5,000 were wounded, most due to kamikaze attacks. Japanese, they lost close to 8,000 aircraft, 95,000 were killed. And on the civilian side, the Army estimated there were 142,000 civilian deaths, most due to mass suicides. At this point, we'd won the war in Europe, and the president was desperate to find a way to end this thing. The Japanese would not surrender. Matter of fact, we were starting to prep for an invasion of mainland Japan. The estimates on our side, 1 million. On the Japanese side, between 35 and 40 million deaths. It would be a battle of biblical proportions. And with that, he had 2 units. First one he dropped on Hiroshima. And with that, the Japanese military said, we're still going to fight. Dropped the second one at Nagasaki. And when he did, the Emperor of Japan did something that no emperor had ever done in over 2,500 years of the Japanese Empire. He stood up to control the military and said, I will surrender. That was the end of World War II. That's what our young men and women did when they fought in World War II. Now, I never read anything, but this I gotta read because it slows me down. What did the folks at home do? Well, remember, no non-military manufacturing. Have any of you been over to Mobile and seen the battleship over there? Big ship, huh? We fought World War II in 3.5 years, only 3.5 years. At the beginning of that, our battleships were all sunk. They were all World War II relics anyway. During that 3.5 years, we built 22 frontline aircraft carriers, 123 escort carriers, and dozens of light carriers, 8 battleships, 48 cruisers, 349 destroyers, 420 destroyer escorts, 203 submarines, 34 million tons of merchant ships, 100,000 fighter aircraft, 98,000 bomber aircraft, 24,000 transport aircraft, 58,000 training aircraft, 93,000 tanks, 257,000 artillery pieces, 105,000 mortars, 3 million machine guns, and 2.5 million military trucks. We put 16.1 million men and women in various services, invaded Africa, Sicily, and Italy, won the Battle of the Atlantic, planned and executed D-Day, marched across the Pacific and Europe, developed the atomic bomb, and ultimately conquered Japan and Germany. Now you know why, when we talk about the young men and young women who fought, died, and worked during World War II, the greatest generation.